The discussion heats up over how markets for low-power TV stations should be determined. Reply comments are due on Tuesday. Also, after 9 years of dedication to community radio, NFCB's leader announces that she will be soon turning over the reins. And this past weekend, the ionic clouds in the E-layer were blossoming, making for some very interesting FMDX. All that and more coming up.
REC, FCC Today, B.G. Bradley.
This is FCC Today, the podcast for Monday, June 12, 2023. Reply comments in MB Docket 23-126, the implementation of the Low Power Protection Act, are due on Tuesday of this week. The Low Power Protection Act, enacted by Congress earlier this year, would give certain secondary low-power TV stations the opportunity to convert to a primary Class A station, which affords them additional protections from displacement. In order to qualify for Class A status, an LPTV station must broadcast at least 18 hours per day, broadcast an average of 3 hours per week of local programming, and be in compliance with the FCC requirements for LPTV stations. In addition, the Low Power Protection Act also states that the station must be in a designated market area with no more than 95,000 television households as defined by Nielsen Media Research, or under a system of dividing television broadcast station licensees into local markets using a system that the FCC determines to be equivalent to the Nielsen method. That last issue was a hot button in comments received in this proceeding. The Low Power TV Broadcasters Association strongly opposes using the Nielsen DMAs. They claim that because of prior events at Nielsen, such as accusations of undercounted viewership and outdated equipment, as well as lawsuits filed by broadcasters against Nielsen alleging fraud and misrepresentation due to undercounting, that Nielsen is no longer a credible source for data. They also address the fact that Nielsen services are expensive for small broadcasters, making it impossible for them to obtain up-to-date official DMA rankings. Claiming that the Nielsen DMAs are designed for full-service TV broadcast stations and not LPTV stations, the LPTV Association requests that the FCC look at using metropolitan statistical areas and rural service areas, which are defined by the federal government's Office of Management and Budget. The National Association of Broadcasters commented that the use of Nielsen DMAs would be appropriate. The NAB claims that not only would creating smaller DMAs from larger ones or substituting market definitions contradict the will of Congress, but it would also have further ramifications concerning network and syndicated programming exclusivity and cable coverage, and could inadvertently hinder the transition to ATSC3 in nearby larger markets. Comments from REC Networks on this docket just briefly address the DMA issue, supporting the use of Nielsen DMAs by calling it a cut-and-dry determination of a station's assignment to a DMA. At the heart of REC's comments in this proceeding were related to the definition of local programming. REC argued that while the language of the LPPA pretty much mirrors its predecessor legislation, the Community Broadcasters Protection Act of 1999, the former law was written during a time when LPTV stations were still analog and were not capable of multicast operations. REC's position was simply that the 3 hours per week requirement must be satisfied on a single free-to-air broadcast stream and not aggregated among multiple streams. REC also supported the position that if the parameters of a station's DMA changes, the station should be able to retain their Class A status absent any significant modification to the LPTV facility. Again, reply comments in MB Docket 23-126 are due by Tuesday at the FCC's electronic comment filing system. Just a reminder, if you're listening to this on the Michelle Bradley YouTube channel, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification dinger to be reminded of future content, both oral and visual. Thank you again for your support. Over this past weekend, REC received several reports of FM stations being heard at extremely long distances. For example, FM stations from Florida were being heard as far as Oklahoma, and stations in Texas were being heard in New Jersey. We've also seen reports of longer distance propagation on lower frequencies, such as 40 megahertz, which is being used right now for experimental operations. The band has been proposed in the past by REC to be allocated for amateur radio service operation on a secondary basis to federal use. The phenomenon known as sporadic E-layer propagation is caused by a buildup of ionization clouds in the E-layer of the atmosphere. Radio signals can bounce off those clouds to achieve this type of effect, resulting in reception over very long distances on frequency bands that normally exhibit line-of-sight propagation. The peak season for this type of E-skip is around June of every year. An additional peak, though less intensive, normally takes place around December. E-skip is most pronounced in the afternoon, so turn on a radio and see if you can pull in some new finds. You never know what you may hear. If you hear something interesting, let us know on our comment line, 202-963-0852. Earlier this month, the chief executive officer of the National Federation of Community Broadcasters, Sally Kane, had announced that after nearly 10 years at the organization, she will be stepping down. During her tenure, she had revitalized the organization through the offering of services and support to over 200 member low-power and full-service FM community radio stations nationwide. NFCB will soon begin the search for a new CEO. Kane will remain with the organization until the new CEO is installed. In a post to the NFCB list, she had stated that she has nothing earth-shattering to announce for what will come next for her, but she simply found herself yearning to try something different. REC Networks has had a great relationship with NFCB under the direction of Sally Kane. We thank her for her service to community radio, and we look forward to maintaining and building on our relationship with NFCB for the years to come. The NFCB will hold their annual Community Media Conference in Denver, Colorado on June 28 through June 30. This will be the first in-person conference since the start of the recent pandemic. More information about NFCB and the Community Radio Conference can be found at NFCB.org. FCC Today, the podcast, has a comment line. Do you have an opinion about the topics discussed on the podcast, a question for me, or just general commentary about the FCC broadcasting or the telecommunications industry in general? Make your voice heard by calling 202-963-0852. Yes, that good old-fashioned thing called the telephone. 202-963-0852. Now write that down. 202-963-0852. It's easy to remember. That's 202. You know the area code where all the bureaucrats are. Then up the right side of the dial, 963, and then up the center, 0852. 202-963-0852. You may hear your voice on a future podcast. We'd love to hear from you. In the aftermath of the 2021 NCE filing window, the FCC has changed the tentative selectee in MX Group 205 from First Dallas Media, proposing service to Golinda, Texas, to East Texas Community Broadcasting, proposing service to Rizal, Texas. The change in designation comes in wake of application amendment activity. Previously, there were allegations that First Dallas overstated their service area populations under the fair distribution criteria. There was also controversy in this group to whether East Texas was able to file an amendment to their previously dismissed application on a nunc-pro-tunc basis, even though that amendment had some minor technical errors. REC Networks filed an informal objection in the group to state that if the amended East Texas application was not accepted due to a potential violation of the nunc-pro-tunc policy, that First Dallas should not be the tentative selectee, and even suggested requested that the commission do this group over by reinstating the application for specialized educational broadcasting, who would have been the tentative selectee if this group was completely re-examined and the East Texas application was dismissed for defects. The FCC dismissed REC's objection under the misunderstanding that it was a petition for reconsideration for specialized. While the East Texas application did survive, it still faces informal objections by community radio advocate Albert David, who claims that East Texas overstated their populations on their initial application and that the East Texas amendment did violate the Nunc-Pro-Tunc policy. The Media Bureau's Nunc-Pro-Tunc policy allows an application that has been dismissed due to technical defects to be able to file one amendment within 30 days of the dismissal to fix all of the problems. All issues, including any undiscovered issues, must be fixed on that amendment, and no further correcting amendments would be allowed. Significant progress has been made over the weekend with the restoral of cell sites on the island of Guam. In our last episode last Thursday, we reported that 33% of the sites were still out of service. In today's status update, the FCC reported that the percentage of down cell sites has decreased to 18.7%. Since Thursday, 200 additional cable and wireline customers have been restored, and there have been no changes in the status of broadcast stations, with one AM station, 2 FM stations, 1 FM translator, and 1 TV station being out of service. The FCC's Disaster Information Reporting System remains activated for Guam. In the Atlantic region, the National Hurricane Center states that they are not expecting any new tropical cyclones to form within the next 7 days. This episode is being recorded at midday on Monday. If any news happens later in the day, we will discuss it on Tuesday's episode.
FCC Today.
FCC Today, the podcast, has been a production of REC Networks, always on at recnet.com. The podcast is also available through Podbean, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, and on the Michelle Bradley YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification dinger to be informed of new episodes. Keep up to the minute with events around the Media Bureau at FCC.today. If you need assistance with an FM broadcast facility, LPFM full service or translator, call 202-621-2355. I'm Michelle Bradley, KU3N, SBE certified broadcast technologist. Thanks for listening.
REC.